Welcome back, Nine World Chronicles audience. Today I wanted to get into a little bit more mythology as we were talking about Akasha, who I know is well known in the vampire mythologies and became really huge star, brought huge acclaim to the actress Aaliyah before her passing, playing the role of this particular vampire demon. And this is Akasha, who is known by her name to being vampire demon. Oh, come on. Who's known as her name as the Queen of the Damned, right? We expect that terminology to be accompanied with Akasha, right? She's well known from this film, which again starred Aaliyah, branched off from the Anne Rice series, the vampire series. But what was interesting about Akasha is that what gets lost in the mythology of Akasha is that she was also a queen of Kemet. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is Akasha's association, or the original vampires' association with ancient Kemet and ancient Sumer, which is where she's from. So if you know anything about the mythology of Akasha, she was born in Sumer, and in the city of Uruk, like 6,000 years ago, right? She's born in Sumer. There's a big picture of the metropolis that Sumer was. So she's born approximately 6,000 years ago. So we're saying roughly 4,000 BCE is when Akasha was born. And during that period of time, if you look back at the historical timeline, this was a thriving city. Everything was going pretty good for the kingdom of Uruk. This was a thriving city. They had lots of trade. So life was pretty good. This was also a period of time where writing really had just been developed, and you were seeing an explosion of what should we say, thriving communities around the world. Not only because of what was going on in Uruk, but there was all types of communities that were thriving. We also know during that period of time, you see I have Kemet here on the bottom. That was also a thriving community. This is when they were doing well. But during this time, in the 4th millennium, this was entering or getting ready to enter into the Bronze Age. You had, this is called early Bronze Age. The wheel was fully in motion there. The kingdom of Kish had been established. Tin was being used in Mesopotamia. Cuneiform or hieroglyphics, depending on what region of the world you're in, were starting to really be prominent. You were seeing pottery start to come out of different areas. In the Anatolia, they start to develop a culture of the Caucasus. In Egypt, this was kind of pre-Pharaoh time, but they were using the sails in that period of time. They were playing harps and flutes. This was starting to be a pretty good kingdom that Akasha was born to. This is what was going on in her day and age. Okay, and if we follow the mythology of what happens, is that she's born in Uruk, and she is wed through a royal wedding. She's wed to the king of Kemet, who happens to be Enkill at this period of time. He's the king of Kemet. So this whole thing starts off pretty well, although we know that this would end in tragedy for Akasha. So this is the moment under which she becomes a queen of Kemet, because the mythology tells us that she ultimately marries this king. And what else is going on at Kemet and a lot of parts of the world is still a little bit of cannibalism. This is again, 4,000 BCE, 6,000 years ago, and cannibalism was a part of some communities' ritual. So this is where Akasha starts having trouble, because like some other royalty, they had wanted to completely abolish cannibalism in their civilizations. And that's something that she went out to do. Now, unfortunately for Akasha, during this period of time, the influence of the spirit world was still very strong. People still dabbled in spirits. And there were two famous witches, two twins, who were said to be very powerful, that lived in Kemet. Now, they're depicted as very fair-skinned, but this is Kemet 6,000 years ago, so they would have been dark-skinned people. But they have these two witches that have these power. And Akasha challenges them. This is going to be another fatal mistake for Akasha. She challenges them to summon a demon. And this demon, you're going to want to write this name down, okay? This demon's name is Amel. And this is a demon that I'll do a piece on later, who we first see, well, I guess he starts off as just an ancient spirit. Actually starts off as human and becomes this thing. And he's born like 12,000 years before any of this stuff happens. But we'll get back to talking about him, because this is where Akasha actually starts generating some problems for herself, right? Do they still on cannibalism? People don't even know that they've been eating. Well, there's someone who's saying the fight against cannibalism has not ended. So Akasha would lose her battle against cannibalism as well. So during the end of her life and her reign, she really starts to have a fallout with the locals. Again, some stuff with the witches. They bring back a mill, which will come back to haunt her later. And she's still not done dealing with these cannibals. So finally, the people all get together and she gets stabbed up. Her and her husband, Enkill, get stabbed up and murdered. And what happened is that this spirit, Emil, who she had summoned, comes and claims her. He sees her soul leaving her body. And he merges his soul with her soul. And they re-enter into her now dead body, but reinvigorated. All of her wounds are healed, and she's back to life. But she's not Akasha anymore. She's not that princess. I mean, and this was it's a really, really pretty princess from Europe. Becomes a Kemetic wife and queen. So they jump into her body now, and she's got this demonic possession, or this ancient spirit possession, which drives her bloodlust. And thus, her husband, Enkill, who was also killed by this murderous group, she consumes the remainder of his blood and then allows him to feed on her. And thus, she creates her first vampire fledgling. Her husband becomes her vampire fledgling. So ultimately, what we find is that it's Emil who is actually the source of all of vampirism. And upon Akasha's death, she would be separated from him, if you watch the modern day telling of this story. And he continues to live on in another form, and I think he actually becomes gifted a new human body. But what I wanted to talk about today was strictly Akasha and who she was. This was someone that we needed to have embraced, who was a queen of the great empire of Kemet, 4000 BCE, one of the high points of the kingdom, who falls prey, who Akasha was doing the right thing, right? Ridding the world of cannibalism, ultimately comes to the murderous intentions of the cannibalistic crowd, and, through her own machinations, becomes the victim of a very bloodthirsty demon in Emil, who turns her into a vampire, and together they father the vampire line. And that's ultimately the mythology of Akasha. You guys have probably seen the rest of the modern telling when she comes back. I want just to focus on that ancient part where she was born, which was Uruk, what her life would have been, what civilization was at that time, and then when she becomes the queen ultimately of Kemet. That's the story of Akasha, at least the ancient part of it. You can check out more details. I will get into breaking down both Uruk and also this shifty character Emil as we take a look at more of the mythology. Thank you as in for always for stopping in at Nine World Chronicles. Please like and subscribe.